I'm Lucy.
And I'm Jennifer.
You're listening to Everything I Know About.
Each week, we share everything we know about a new topic, equipped with some internet research and a little too much exposure to pop culture. Hey, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
So today we're coming at you with a bit of a random niche topic, but we are talking about mafia enterprises that you may not have known about. And this all got kicked off because I had stumbled across some info on the sand mafia. And I laughed at first because I was like, what the hell is this? There's no way this is real. What is this talking about? And after just briefly scratching the surface, I was like, okay, this is actually very fascinating. I didn't know sand was so integral to our world and that there's a literal organized crime that controls this economy. That's crazy. Turns out there's lots of economies that we don't know about that are controlled by organized crime and mafias. So today, Lucy has taken the topic of sand mafias and did some digging for us. And I have taken the olive oil mafia, really called the agro mafia in Italy. And we're going to share our findings.
Before doing this, if you had said mafia, I would have thought drugs and like racketeering. I don't know, like what you see in the movies, right? Not that I watch a ton of mafia movies or anything. I'm like too scared to watch movies about the mafia.
Really?
Yeah, girl, I can't watch anything scary. I'm solely in rom-com territory.
Yeah, you would not be able to handle The Godfather or Scarface or anything.
Obviously, I've heard that those movies are classics. They're so amazing, but I have not seen them. So when you brought this up, I was pretty shocked that there would be something as seemingly mundane as sand or olive oil associated with these large organized crime rings. But actually, when I was digging in, I was like, this is fascinating. And I feel like it doesn't get a lot of coverage, or maybe just in the circles that we're operating in. I don't hear about that much.
Yeah.
Is that what you found too?
Well, I actually have like quite a bit of experience with the mafia.
What? What? Okay, explain.
Okay, so when I was 14, I studied abroad in Italy. It was in Rome. And the high school that I went to actually had this memorial for a girl who jumped off the roof of the school because her family was murdered by the mafia and she was like being pursued by them. And they had this program where you would go down to Naples and talk to people who got out of the mafia or were victims of the mafia. And it was like awareness. And I had also studied abroad on the Amalfi Coast in Sorrento, which is right by Naples. And there's tons and tons of mafia activity in Naples. And I was dating a Italian, they call them a carabinieri, but they're like basically the anti-mafia task force. And so he was telling me all about it. And like, if you're looking over the Bay of Naples, you'll see fireworks. And I was like, oh, this is so beautiful, the fireworks. He goes, those aren't happy fireworks. They're setting off fireworks when one of the mafia members gets out of jail to say like, welcome home. So that's what you're seeing.
Wow.
Yeah, there's tons of extortion still. It's just kind of part of the DNA of Italy still. And I didn't realize, like, especially in southern Italy. And then oddly, this actually just happened this week, but my mom's cousin passed away and she got all of his stuff. And we found out that her other cousin that died when she was a kid was actually murdered by the mafia in Atlantic City.
What?
Yeah, he has like letters from the mafia saying that like he didn't commit suicide. He was murdered by the Atlantic City mafia. It was like a warning kill for the New York City mob. Like crazy, crazy. But Atlantic City is also really run by the mob with casinos and gambling. It's usually where you see it. But yeah, I oddly have a little bit of a taste of the mafia.
Oh my God. Wait, so your cousin must have been in the mafia, like a competing mafia.
He was involved because he was a manager at Caesars in Atlantic City.
Oh, okay. So he probably just got caught up. Like he didn't take the bribe or something. So they killed him.
I think he was in the mafia.
Oh, he was in it.
He was in it. Yeah, but he was murdered.
Dang. That is crazy.
Crazy. I hope it's okay to say on here. It was a long time ago. Don't come after me.
Oh,
yeah, I don't want the mob coming after me. I think we're small enough that it'll be fine.
We can cut the part where you say that he was in it.
No, it's okay. We can keep it.
Okay.
It's fine.
All right, all right. Oh God, I don't want you to become a target here.
It's fine. I'm in Nashville. They can't get me here.
Don't tell people where you are, Jennifer.
We can cut that part.
Oh gosh. Well, before I even looked into the sand mafia, I just did like a quick encyclopedia search about the mafia. So most scholars think that the mafia emerged in Sicily in the 19th century during Italy's unification, though some say earlier, like in the late Middle Ages. And it drew its members from many small private armies, or mafia, which is where that word comes from, that were hired by landlords who were absentee to protect their land while they were gone. And then during the 18th and 19th centuries, these private armies, these mafia, organized themselves and grew so powerful that they turned against the landowners who had hired them, became the sole law on many of these estates. and started extorting money from the landowners in return for protecting their crops and their land. So you have the origin of how I think mafias work today.
Yep.
And they're especially known for this system of private justice, which is regulated by this moral code based on omerta. It means the obligation never, under any circumstances, to go to the legal authorities for justice and to never rat anyone out. The right to avenge is reserved for the victim and their family. And if you break this code of silence or if you go to the authorities, you are next on the list in terms of the mafia taking you down. So those are origins. And like, it is actually, even in America, like the mafia, as you just said, it still exists.
Definitely.
The American version of the mafia did come from these Italian immigrants who were members of the mafia in Italy and like brought some of that organization here to America. And the version in the United States is called Cosa Nostra, which is Italian for our affair. So that's the branch in the United States that still exists. There's apparently 5 crime families in the New York City area that run things in the underground world here.
Wow. Yeah, it's definitely like the stereotype of New York, New Jersey, Boston. I mean, that's where The Departed takes place in Boston. But yeah, no, it is one of those things that you think is just like, oh, that was in the past. That was back then. That was in the 1800s, 1900s. But no, it's very much alive and well, unfortunately. And as we're going to talk about, you can even see it in your grocery store.
Very intriguing. I should put some music there. Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so did you know that olive oil is one of the most fraudulently labeled foods in the world?
I did not know that. I would not have expected that.
Yeah, it is the most investigated food by the European Union. And the business of counterfeit olive oil is often compared to the cocaine trade. So kind of funny that you said you often think of drugs and you think of the mafia, but even the authorities liken all of this to the cocaine trade.
Why are they comparing it to cocaine? It makes as much money as that? Or
I think it's the system of extortion and the smuggling, like the way that it operates is similar to the cocaine trade.
Got it.
Yes. So I did not know this, but 80% of the Italian olive oil on the market is fake. Some experts think that it's a total exaggeration, that 80% isn't completely fake, but everyone does agree that it's all deliberately mislabeled. So you are not getting extra virgin Italian olive oil.
What are you getting?
You're mostly getting canola oil, seed oils, and just really low quality olive oil. So extra virgin is the first press of the olive. And so they'll maybe have that first press, but then continue to squeeze and have just like very low quality diluted olive oil that they'll use as a base mixed in with all of these other seed oils. And then they put chlorophyll and other colorants in it to give it that green look and artificial flavors and aromas to make it look and taste like olive oil.
So it's like, yeah, I feel like I know what olive oil tastes like. So if it doesn't taste like olives, you kind of know it's bad. But if they're adding olive flavoring, I don't know that I would be able to tell the difference.
No, and that's the thing is our taste buds aren't trained to true olive oil, so we can't tell the difference. The average consumer can't. Any olive oil that you're not buying directly from the producer, so basically most olive oils that you're going to find at grocery stores, even Whole Foods, they said most of the olive oils are bad. It's just vegetable oil with added colors and aromas.
Is this true of just Italian brand olive oil or like any olive oil period?
Okay, that's a very good question. It seems to be a olive oil problem in general due to the Italian mafia.
Okay.
However, it is more safe to get Greek, Spanish, Tunisian olive oil, but they're still not the safe bet to do that.
Sounds like you need to press your own olives if you really want to know it's 100%.
Oh, I'm getting there. We have a whole section on how to get good olive oil. Don't you worry. So when you're at the grocery store, one thing that's really going to tip you off that it's fake is that the price is going to be really low. I mean, that's obvious, but like I was thinking back to like most recent time I was at the grocery store buying olive oil and I'm like, there were options that were like $3 or $4. And you're like, obviously, because the vegetable oil is basically the same price. There's no way that that's real. And even buying like organic or expensive olive oil doesn't guarantee you shit. It often just means that it's a more elaborate fraud.
Okay. And you're talking, because there's like different grades of olive oil, right? Like there's extra virgin, there's, I don't know if it's called virgin, or there's like one tier down from that that's more yellowy. I've seen that being sold.
Yeah.
And you're saying even that kind of labeling like really means nothing.
Correct.
Dang.
Yeah. So the Italian police began to uncover why all of the olive oil was fraudulent. It was a big, massive undertaking by the European commissions, and the Italian police dubbed it Mamma Mia, This is not a joke. It is Operation Mamma Mia. And
Oh, that's so cute.
it's so cute. And they discovered a massive olive oil scandal in southern Italy. So this is Puglia, Umbria, and Campania. So it involves low quality olive oils from Syria, Turkey, Morocco, Tunisia, Greece, and Spain. That's why I say you can't even get guaranteed from all of these other places. And essentially what they do is they gather all of them together, they mix them, and then they dilute them with the vegetable oils, and then they sell them to foreign markets, particularly the United States and Japan, oddly. The way that they discovered this, which I thought was really cute, it's very Operation Mamma Mia coded. They developed an elite Italian food police that were certified in the authenticity of olive oil. And they took the barrels that were being exported and tasted them. They took little sips. And these policemen were so highly trained that them saying that this is not 100% pure extra virgin olive oil was permissible in court as evidence.
Wow.
So they were basically just able to taste it and be like, this is fraudulent. Okay, off to court. That's all they needed.
That's crazy.
There were 60 police officers that this was their job.
Wow. So imagine being trained as a police officer, but also as basically a sommelier for olive oil.
Truly, truly.
But you have such a refined palate to be able to tell the difference. That's crazy.
Mamma mia. The main police operator says that America is the dumping ground for all of these fraudulent operatives because Americans they don't really have the palate to understand good from bad, unfortunately. And there's just not enough resources to control the 350,000 tons of olive oil entering the United States each year, which is just so much. So there's a mix of various factors that led to the mafia being able to come in and actually take over the industry. So one of them is a general inflation of prices. Olives just got more expensive. And so producers had increased demand. Everyone kind of loves the Mediterranean diet. You want to use that over lard like we used to back in the day. So huge increase in global demand. And climate change kind of comes into this. The olives aren't yielding as much as they used to. And then there's a bacteria that's killing all of the olive trees. The yield has gone down about 20% due just to this bacteria. And so it was just ripe conditions for organized crime to come in, take over things, dilute it, and undercut the authentic olive oil market. So they're dubbing this mafia as the agri-mafia, agricultural mafia. As they step in to fill the gaps in the market, we basically just don't know what's real from fake. Unless you are literally buying it from the producer themselves, there's just absolutely no way to know, which is really, really unfortunate.
So how does the fraud here work? The mafia pays suppliers directly to get their oil. And then, there's some sort of market rate for olives, right? I don't know if they're buying the olives or after they've already been pressed.
Well, strap on your boots because this is a little crazy how they get it done. So like I said, the mafia is pretty integrated in Italian society. So a lot of these farmers have been paying dues to the mafia for generations.
Okay.
And so it's just kind of
protection
accepted.
fees.
Yeah, it's extortion. So they've just been being extorted for generations, just kind of part of life. It's just what you do. So they're already there. And then what happens is these gangs come and either force the suppliers to sell to them as the middleman, who will then dilute and then sell to the distributors. Or if people refuse, they resort to what they call chainsaw attacks. This is a theft of the entire olive tree. So they go with chainsaws and they saw down these ancient olive trees because it's too difficult to harvest the fruit off the tree. They just take the whole damn tree. It's actually really, really sad. They also break into warehouses and steal the olives. And then when they're doing that, they destroy all of the harvesting machinery in an attempt to delay the harvest so they can just cut down more trees. So it's either you give it to us or we're destroying your farm.
Yeah, not much of an option there.
Not much of an option. This fraud yields $16 billion a year for the mafia. So what I thought was really interesting about this is it not only involves olive oil, but it affects a range of Italian import foods. And I'll just go over two that I personally affect me almost every single day because I drink red wine and I eat mozzarella. So I hate to burst our collective bubbles here, but the agri-mafia has totally ripped off Italian mozzarella. So basically it's bleached with detergent. The other huge problem is red wine, unfortunately. Basically, they just take inferior blends, mix it with the good stuff, sell it, and then keep the difference. And in one instance that they actually intercepted this one, but it was 52 gallons of fraudulent red wine. And that would have been a $5 million profit for the mafia. It's really wild. The mob also owns 5,000 restaurants in Italy that they sell their fraudulent food to. So they're really on all steps of the distribution market here.
Yeah, that's
really
crazy.
wild stuff.
I'm curious for things like this where it's the Italian mafia, but it's also dealing with import export. Like, who is responsible for enforcing catching these crime syndicates? Is it the Italian authorities or which jurisdiction is supposed to have control?
So it's both the national Italians that are doing it. Local law enforcement is involved as well, but the Carabinieri are the like mafia task force that is solely dedicated to mafia in general. But when it comes to import-export stuff, since it is under the jurisdiction of the EU has entire committees dedicated to now olive oil fraud. And they've come out with reports. I saw a lot of commissions on this. They're really concerned about it because it's such a source of income for the EU and the consumers beginning to lose trust in European exports.
Got it.
But I want to leave us off on a happy note. How can we find authentic olive oil? So do you have like a brand that you go to?
The current olive oil in my pantry is Tunisian. It's from Costco. Like I bought it from there, but it's not Costco brand. It's like some sort of Tunisian olive oil that they import.
Is it the one that's the yellow label with the horse on it?
Yeah, that one.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, you know it.
I only know it because there's a food influencer. It's like a dude who always cooks for his wife and he's a spokesperson. It's either his olive oil or he's a spokesperson for it. Okay. And I was a sucker and I bought it. But it's good. I like it.
It's good, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's true. So like I did not spend a whole year in Italy like you, but my husband and I, we were in Italy for 3 months towards the latter half of the pandemic, and it was fall and it was olive season, and we were driving around the countryside and, you know,
idyllic.
It was lovely, and seeing all of the people harvesting their olives and staying in just kind of a lot of rural areas. And a lot of the Airbnbs we stayed at, they obviously provided olive oil as part of your like cooking kit. And the olive oil was always amazing. We would just dip bread in it and not even use it to cook. And it's true that in the United States, I've never been able to find or get as good of olive oil as I've had there. But I always just assumed that was an ignorance on my part. Like I just didn't know how to find it or know what to even ask for. So it's really sad that like it's just totally diluted and you can't actually taste the quality, because the quality stuff is incredible. Like it's sad that it's hard to get that stuff here.
Totally. It's so good. I mean, even my host family there, they pressed their own olive oil and they said the same thing. They're like, oh, the stuff in the grocery store isn't real. But they didn't tell me it was mafia controlled. They were just like, it's not real. Like we go get it ourselves. So I think it's just like very common for people to have their own supply directly from the distributor. It does taste so much different. It's so sad. I, again, being on my highly influenced bullshit, have been using the Graza olive oil that went viral.
I've seen that.
Like the squeeze bottle.
Yeah, it's like not even to cook with, it's to drizzle, right?
To drizzle, yeah. There's like the drizzle and the sizzle versions. So I looked into Graza and I was like, how legit is this stuff? And obviously they're going to say it's legit. And then all of the articles I could find were like sponsored articles. So I couldn't actually get really good information, but they do claim that they pick, press, and bottle all with the same distributor. So the fact that they're even actively saying this is what they do, I think they're aware of it. So maybe it's good. The problem is, and this is another tip for finding good olive oil, is it should always be in a glass bottle and in a dark glass bottle, because olive oil is highly sensitive to light. And so one of the things that people say about Graza is it's this plastic squeeze bottle. Like there's no way this is good olive oil. But they come back and say, well, you're supposed to use it within like a month. It's not supposed to sit on your shelf for months on end, which I kind of think is BS because it's kind of expensive. So I'm like, you want me to throw it away after a month? But
maybe they're just saying you should eat a lot of olive oil. Use it up in a month.
Yeah, that too. So unfortunately, there's really not a great way to find authentic olive oil. There is one distributor called Fresh Pressed Olive Oil that you can get a subscription service. They work directly with producers in Italy. I'm actually going to be signing up for it after this episode because I really want my quality olive oil. But again, like no plastic, no clear glass, and you should always look for a harvested on date on your bottle. Not an expired by, but a harvested on, because that means that they take pride in when it was harvested, and it usually indicates some level of quality that you can't get from a seal.
From a pricing perspective, if you were to buy the actual good stuff, you're saying it's not even necessarily like more expensive, because even the inferior stuff is being marked up and sold just as a branding exercise. So it's more just about being educated and then like figuring out how to actually get a good source that you trust.
Yep. And they said if you do develop a palate for good olive oil, grocery stores are so aware of this problem that they'll actually take your olive oil back if you take it home and taste it and you're like, this isn't real.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. So
any grocery store.
That's what they said online. I'm not going to speak for every grocery store, but I'm sure if you get this at like Whole Foods,
worth trying.
They would be like, yeah. So buy directly from the farmers if you can.
Yeah. Book that trip to Italy if you can.
Yeah.
Make some connections. Dang. Well, that's fascinating. Thanks for sharing.
Yes. Well, I'm so excited to hear about the sand mafia now.
Oh, yeah.
Is this even an Italian mafia?
No. We're going to move to a different part of the world now. Yeah.
Incredible.
Okay, so first, just to start with some fascinating facts about sand. Yes. It doesn't sound like it will be fascinating, but I was truly blown away. So sand is the second most consumed natural resource in the world after fresh water.
Whoa. Even
Yeah.
before gas?
Yeah,
Wow,
by
I
a
thought
lot
for
more.
sure oil and gas.
So sand is a
Whoa.
fundamental ingredient in concrete, so all of our construction,
Yeah.
glass, even the
Mhm.
silicon chips in our technology,
Really?
and even consumer products like toothpaste. Yeah.
There's sand in my toothpaste?
Yep. That like grittiness, that's silica, which comes from sand. So all
Whoa.
sand is not the same. Glass manufacturers and high-end resorts need soft white beach sand. For construction and to make concrete, the main need is gritty sand from riverbeds, lakes, wetlands. Desert sand is not usable for construction because it's actually too silky. The granules are like very circular because they've been eroded by air instead of water.
That's kind of beautiful.
It is, yeah. But it also creates lots of problems because when Dubai was building their tallest building in the world, they had to import sand from Australia, even though they are surrounded by desert, because they didn't have the right kind of sand to make concrete. Yeah,
Shit you never think about.
I know. So fascinating. And then countries are also using sand to literally expand their borders. So Singapore is the largest importer of sand. They don't consume it the most. That would be China, but they're the largest importer because Singapore has no sand of its own. And they've imported it from their neighboring islands, to grow their landmass. So they literally dump the sand on the beaches and expand their land. And actually, Indonesia has lost at least 24 islands to this, so that eventually Malaysia, Indonesia, and Vietnam banned the export of sand to Singapore. They implemented those laws between 2000 and 2010, but obviously it's still happening. It's just happening underground now.
My jaw is on the floor. I can't even picture how this works. Okay, there's like so many different factors in this that I'm thinking about. I'm like, wait, how do you just dump sand in the beach or on the water and grow your land? Isn't it unstable? Doesn't it eventually just like silt down into the ocean floor? You would think, right? That's so much fucking sand
It's
that
a
you
lot
would
of sand.
need.
And we've even done this in the US. Like the city of San Francisco, they pushed into the bay and actually layered in rocks, gravel, sand to create land in the bay where there was no land before.
Sounds like a recipe for erosion. Like, wouldn't it just erode eventually? Especially when you put a really heavy building on top, it would just kind of like sink, I would think. It seems like a very unstable foundation. I don't know. I would be concerned.
Yeah, I mean, clearly when they invented concrete, it's basically just a combination of sand, gravel, like glued together. And it is one of the strongest structure in existence, right? So sand, even though like, yeah, we think of it as these like separate particles, and it was literally created by erosion. It's surprisingly powerful if you can, put it in the right chemical components. So I'm sure they figured this out because it's worked. Like Singapore is literally 25% bigger than it was before.
That's absolutely wild.
Because sand is so high in demand, obviously the human population is increasing and therefore construction is increasing, right? So we're actually building the equivalent of 8 New York cities every year in the world.
Oh my God.
And we use 50 billion tons of sand each year. That is twice the amount of sand that is created annually in nature. And demand is only growing. So at the current rate, experts say we are going to run out of construction-grade sand by 2050.
Wait, that's really soon.
Really soon, yeah. It's not like there will be like no grains of sand left in 2050. It's easily accessible sand is rapidly depleting to the point where it's similar with oil and fracking. We're doing things like fracking because we've already used up all of the oil that's near the surface of the earth. And now we're doing things that are unsafe for both the environment and humans to get more. And sand is very similar, right? Because as we run out of the more accessible things, like, because we can only use, again, like for construction, we can only use sand from riverbeds, lakes, wetlands. These are limited in quantities, right? So,
and also horrible for the creatures that live there.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. The depletion of sand is causing everything you can imagine because it's literally fucking with our water system. So
yeah,
river pollution, obviously fish, sea life dying, flooding, shrinking aquifers, depleting groundwater, even more droughts because it just obviously affects the water cycle.
Yeah.
So yeah, really bad.
That is insane.
And you have growing demand, shrinking supply. The prices are obviously going up. The price of sand is expected to double by 2100. So it's extremely lucrative. And there's not really a replacement for it because you kind of need the concrete to build the buildings. Like people are moving to cities, they want to live in buildings. And so it's a perfect breeding ground for crime. And estimates say that the global illegal sand trade ranges from $200 billion to $350 billion a year. That is more than illegal logging, gold mining, and fishing combined. It ranks as the third largest transnational crime. So back what I was saying about what I think about when I think about mafia, I think about like counterfeiting, drug trafficking. So counterfeiting is number 1, drug trafficking is number 2, sand is number 3. Just to put it in perspective, I'll drop a little chart into the video, but sand is about 1/4 the estimated value of counterfeiting and 1/2 the annual value of drug trafficking. So these are
That's
lucrative.
wild.
Yeah.
That is wild. All for sand. Is there a way to man-make sand or like take the concrete that exists and kind of grind it down? Because there's so many like abandoned buildings and stuff. Like you would think that we can reuse it, but I don't know if
That's
it
a
works
good question. You can recycle old buildings, yes, and you can create essentially new building materials. I don't know the exact pricing of that, but I think maybe one day will make more sense if sand gets expensive enough where the economics are going to shift.
So we just haven't hit that inflection point yet.
Yeah, but I also think the reality is like we're talking like a world scale economy, right? So like even if there's a country where the population is shrinking, there's less demand for buildings, maybe some are getting torn down. Those aren't in the countries that are like rapidly developing and like their populations are booming. So you'd have to figure out how to recycle the old stuff, price it in a way that's as attractive as new concrete, and ship it there. And since a lot of the demand is in developing countries, that's also why crime is such an issue. Unlike other mined resources like coal or oil, sand is pretty easy to access. Like you can steal sand. Like literally, I'll talk about this, but there's a case of a stolen beach in Jamaica. So you like people can take trucks and go to places and do it. So it's countries where they're rapidly developing, they have weak environmental policies or at least weak ability to enforce those policies. Just to even give an example with the Singapore situation and its neighbors, less than 4% of the 80 million tons of sand that Singapore imported from Cambodia between 2009 and 2019 was even documented. So Cambodia just lost all of that sand and they don't even have any record of it.
Because it was just from organized crime.
Yeah. The term that they're using for this organized crime is called a sand mafia. And these exist in many places in the world, Kenya, Indonesia, Gambia, Morocco, but it seems to be the worst in India. So India is the world's second largest producer of cement behind China. And India obviously also has huge demand for sand because of all the construction needs. Since the early 2000s, sand demand in India has more than tripled. There are specific regions in India where this is particularly a problem. So Bihar, for example, is this region in northeast India. It's one of the poorest and most densely populated regions of India. And a mining NGO recorded the deaths of at least 35 citizens, 5 journalists and activists, 2 police officers, 11 government officials in the 3 years between 2019 and 2022. In addition to those alleged murders, there were road accidents, incidents during extraction, and drowning of children in pits, which is horrible. In total, hundreds of people die and are injured each year in India in connection with sand mining.
That's awful.
It's awful. And these are obviously only the ones that are even reported. So
that is incredibly effed up.
Yeah, the mafias in India, they operate out in the open because, it's pretty hard to hide like a bunch of sand trucks carting sand around, right? So
it's not subtle.
It's not subtle. Yeah, like people know this is happening. It's just that they've been bribed or they're like working with the mafia, so they don't care. And even like politicians, India has struggled with corruption in general, but there have been politicians arrested for their connection with the sand mafia and corruption. And basically, they just operate out in the open. And if the police or politicians or whoever doesn't take the bribe, then they face violence. This quote from this local government official that said, "The police are hand in glove with the miners. When I call the police to escort me on a raid, they tip off the miners that we are coming." Even in cases where they're brought to court, no one is convicted. They always get off on some technicality. Because they have like the justice system in their pocket too, right? It just feels like nothing can be done because everyone is just being bribed by the mafia or they're too afraid to act.
What I don't quite understand about this mafia enterprise versus the olive oil one. Like in the olive oil one, it made sense why it was happening because it was a fraudulent behavior that the farmers weren't a part of, right? Like they were diluting the olive oil. It was fraud. Whereas this, it sounds like they're criminally exporting true sand. It's the real product. Why isn't the government doing it? Where's the opportunity for organized crime to flourish in this? I'm not quite understanding.
So the government can create regulations like you have to have a permit, for example, to dig sand or to gather sand. I don't know.
Harvest the sand.
Yeah, harvest. Yeah, this is like we're talking Dune here. The government can say like you need a permit to harvest sand. And that's why there is the legal sand trade, like the trade that's documented, like in the 4% I mentioned in Cambodia that was tracked. Like there are legal ways, because obviously we do need to power construction. There are legal ways for companies to be in business buying and selling sand. But the issue is when organized crime is involved, like, okay, so I don't have a permit. I'm technically not allowed to do it in this area or like this protected wetland, or maybe the government has just said there's been too much extraction, like we all need to stop. But like, I don't care because I don't need to listen to you, right? I'm not going to get in trouble if I bring my crew and like go there and just do it. And I mean, it depends on the country. Like in India, from what I read, people are just doing it in the daylight out in the open. The case I mentioned in Jamaica, they stole that beach overnight.
Okay.
So they were trying to be a little bit more clandestine, but to fight against this, you basically need very strong local law enforcement that isn't corrupt and isn't in the pocket of the mafia. And you also need like local people to like alert you. And like if everybody's afraid, it just doesn't feel like there's much you can do.
Yeah. Okay, so the fraud isn't in the product, it's in where the product is being sourced from. So it's like the government saying like we shouldn't extract from this wetland, and then the mafia comes in and is like, fuck it, we're doing it anyway, and you can't stop us.
Yeah, and so this case in Jamaica, I just remember learning about this from a Planet Money episode back in the day. In 2008, there was a sand theft in Jamaica. Basically, these thieves showed up in dump trucks and stole a whole beach, Coral Springs Beach, which was this lovely white sand Caribbean beach. And they stole 500 truck worths of sand worth $1 million.
Oh my God.
In the Planet Money episode, they interviewed locals and they were like, yeah, overnight the beach was just gone. A local lawyer was trying to figure out like, okay, what happened? Where did the sand go? And he noticed that 2 private resorts who had brown sand, there was like seemingly white sand kind of sprinkled atop the brown sand. And so he brought a civil case against them. And they were like, no, we bought this sand from a supplier. It was legal. Like, how are we supposed to know if it's not legal? We paid for it. It's not like we stole the sand. But the lawyer's argument was like, you're still responsible as the purchaser for not doing your due diligence and like buying illegal sand. Which is true of like, if somebody steals your MacBook and they try to resell it and somebody buys that stolen MacBook, I do think technically it's also that person's responsibility.
Really?
Yeah. You have to return the property. It's not like just because you paid for it, it's yours now.
Yeah. Okay, I guess that's fair. I was just thinking like, I don't know that I can look around the room right now and think of a single ethically made item.
I mean, ethically made, that's a whole other, I agree with you.
Yeah.
This is like stolen property though, right? Of course, like the private resorts are going to be like, of course we knew nothing about this. And it's really hard to know, like, did they? Like, maybe they did know and they just obviously aren't admitting it. There was actually also a criminal case brought against them by the Crown. So Queen Elizabeth, since Jamaica is part of the Commonwealth.
Yeah.
And this is equivalent to like if someone plundered the Grand Canyon, right? Like that's why the Crown was like, you can't just like steal a part of the beach. You can't just like do that. So they brought a criminal case against these 2 private resorts. But unfortunately, a whole bunch of strange things started happening after. So their main witness, the Crown's main witness, started getting these death threats. So he dropped out from testifying. So the Crown was forced to drop their case. In the civil suit, they didn't have a witness. And there was like very little physical evidence. They did have all these scientists come in and try to like match the sand and whatnot, but it wasn't strong enough of a case without the witness. And then also the lawyer who was bringing the civil case, the judge in that situation decided to retire. And he never gave a verdict. So convenient, right?
How convenient.
I know. So the hotels ended up settling with the owner of the beach. But yeah, very disappointing that there was like no one held accountable.
That is insane.
I'm going to end with this last story that I found when I was doing research, because actually I think this is maybe the only hopeful story amongst the bunch. So Kenya also has these sand mafias, but I read this article about this woman. Her name is Halanishi Youssef. She's doing a PhD in sand mining and river systems, but she grew up in Makwene County, where there's a huge sand industry. Very similar struggles to like what I described previously in terms of regulating the illegal sand trade. So there was a law in 2015 that created this local sand authority, but there was really no enforcement. And so between 2015 and 2017, there were at least 9 people who were killed in direct relation to the sand mafia, dozens injured, a lot of corruption with like the permits and like permit fees. Then a small group of these sand loaders actually flipped and became vigilantes. So because this was like a local area where a lot of the sand workers were also living there, they were realizing that the mining was like worsening arid conditions, it was harming their land, and that only outsiders were profiting. And so they saw all these officials getting rich from bribes and these construction groups hauling the county's sand elsewhere, and they were just fed up with it, and they said, we're going to stop this. So they actually started burning trucks. So in December 2016, 2 Kenyan truck drivers died when they were parked loading sand out of a riverbed at midnight. The vigilantes surrounded them and set both them and their trucks on fire.
And obviously they were part of the organized crime, right? These truck drivers.
Yeah.
I mean, still a terrible loss of life still, but yeah.
And so now you have essentially infighting. And okay, here's the optimistic part. I promise some optimism. So this woman who is studying this PhD, Yusuf, her job now, so after she ended up going to Nairobi, getting educated, she comes back to her hometown, and she now leads the Makwene County Sand Authority. And she's kind of done 3 things strategically that have really, really worked. So the first thing is that the authority allows permits only for local construction projects. They no longer allow sand to leave the county. The second thing is that she has been doing just like community organizing. So she's been doing a series of meetings with local groups at the rivers, explaining to them the consequences of what happens when you remove too much sand, just meeting people where they are and explaining like the environmental impact. And then 3, she made her office's books public to show that full transparency, half of the revenue from these licensing fees is going straight into river restoration projects. There's no corruption here. And she's been doing this for 5 years, and now the shady syndicates have backed off. So
how did she get them to back off?
Well, this is interesting, right? Because a lot of the syndicates, I mean, there's sometimes local ones, but there's a lot of them are also from these big cities, right? So the shady syndicates from Nairobi no longer had any effective local agents in Makwene. If you think about like a local person, right? Usually they're taking the bribe because they need the money. It's not like they hate their town and they want their town to suffer. It's just there's not like another option. And it seems like she's really able to change the sentiment of that town to be like, no, we need to protect our county. Like the sand stays here. The sand can be an industry that benefits us and like we can make money, but we're not exporting it anymore. And so once the Nairobi sand mafia kind of lost its contacts in Makwene, it just like wasn't worth their time anymore. So they just moved on to another area.
That's incredible that she was able to do that.
Yeah.
I've never heard anything like that. Just, just chatting with the mafia and being like, this isn't really good for our community. And they're like, you know what? You're right.
Well, okay, this is another thing, right? Because like, and this might be a difference, honestly, between like the Italian mafia versus these sand mafias. A lot of the reporting on these sand mafias, they were saying that they're loosely organized groups. They're a combination of like entrepreneurs, politicians, union leaders, corrupt police officers. It feels quite varied in terms of how closely knit they really are and like how organized they really are.
Yeah, it's not like, I don't know, a secret society where you like wear your mafia badge and you're like part of the crew. You're probably just like loosely involved in some way. Just like, okay, cut off your little bit of involvement here. And then enough people do that and it falls apart.
Right. So I think especially if you think about, this is like me trying to put on the hat of a crime lord, of a Don. But like, I would imagine like, okay, if I'm the Don, okay, my mafia, like I'm strong in certain areas, but obviously like my network isn't everywhere, right? So I'm sure part of it was also a bit of luck in that the mafia, it's not like they fought back. They were kind of like, yeah, this county's not really worth it to us. It's like a little bit too much hassle for what it's worth. So we're just going to move on.
Yeah.
I'm not saying this strategy would officially work anywhere. Maybe in a mafia stronghold it'd be a lot more difficult, but I think it's just so impressive and empowering that she like saw this issue in her community and was able to like, just through persistence and like simple things, building trust with people, education, and bringing her own experience, that she was able to turn things around.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love that story. That's a great one to end on.
Yeah.
Wow. I learned so much from this episode. Holy crap.
Yeah, I feel like your portion, there's like real takeaways that will affect my life, like how I buy olive oil. With sand, it's a little trickier to be like an informed consumer.
I don't think I'll ever be on a beach the same way again. I'm going to look at it and be like, how much is this worth? Like,
Totally.
can I make a building out of this? Like,
Well, so that's what they say. They recommend if you do want to educate yourself and like be an informed consumer and not support these sand mafias, that like when you do travel and you're going to like a private beach or like a luxury resort, that you should try to look up information about their sand. It's kind of that. I mean, this is obviously a difficult angle. Like people always say like, oh, it's on the consumer to like try to fix things. And obviously, no, we also need
right.
laws and enforcement in place. But if you wanted to, as a consumer, like at least feel like you did your part, then that is something that you could do.
It starts with awareness.
It starts with awareness. Yeah. And even sand. I mean, people don't think about sand at all. But I never thought about sand. But
Fuck, I
now
never thought about it.
now having learned about it, I'm like, wow, it is so important. It does like change the way I think about it.
That's really wild. The next thing I'm going to have to look up is why can't we just dig the sand from the bottom of the ocean? Why do we have to like take it from the riverbeds?
So I know actually the answer.
Oh,
to that.
of course you know the answer. Okay, tell me.
So you can't use beach sand for construction because of the salt. Basically, when you make the concrete, it absorbs a lot of water because of the nature of that type of sand.
Oh,
And its exposure to salt, it like changed the properties so that it really absorbs water, which obviously for buildings, you don't want like a waterlogged wall or anything like that.
Yeah.
But also I imagine it's like very difficult to get all that sand up from the seafloor.
I'm sure they could figure out a way.
Yeah, if it becomes lucrative enough.
Yeah, for sure. Wow. All right. Well, I feel like my worldview is widened. Thank you, Lucy. And everyone go get your olive oil from a local producer in Italy. Check out freshpressedoliveoil.com. That's where I'm going to be going like literally when we end this episode. I'm going to go sign up for my little olive oil subscription. So
You'll have to let us know how it tastes and if it's authentic.
I will. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye. If you enjoy the pod, we would love for you to give us a follow and rate us on Apple Podcasts, which helps us get the word out and reach new listeners. Full transcripts and show notes are available on Patreon, where if you choose to become a patron, you'll also get access to bonus content, our monthly book club, and our eternal gratitude.
If you'd like to get in touch or suggest a topic for a future episode, email us at everythingiknowaboutpod@gmail.com or DM us across all socials at EikaPod, that's EIKA pod. Thanks for listening and see you next week.